Hi everyone, Crista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today we are talking about search options, specifically about Soundex and Wildcards and some of the search options available for given name and surname searches. Now, we all know or hopefully have learned that as we go back into historical records, the names of our ancestors weren't always spelled consistently the same way. There may be issues of illiteracy in the family where they didn't know how to spell their own name. That's more common than you might think. The person who was taking the information down may not have been terribly literate. There may have been language barriers or accents that caused one person not to understand the other as they wrote information down, and just downright sloppy handwriting that's caused problems for those who transcribe the records being able to understand exactly what it says. And so names get indexed a lot of different ways, and then when we're searching those indexes, they don't always come up the way that we're expecting them to, or we can't find people because we're not searching with some of those things in mind as we do our searches. So today I'm just going to talk to you about some basic search principles and some of the tools available on Ancestry.com to help with those searches. For those of you who've been using Ancestry for a long time, some of this information may be brand new, so I encourage you to stick around even though this seems like a fairly basic topic. And then at the end of the presentation, I'll give you a little bonus search tip. It's actually the one thing that I do in almost all of my searches that gives me the most positive results most times. That was a lot of words, but hopefully if you stick around for that, that will be a reward for you. So let's go ahead and dive in. We're going to talk, I'll be flipping back and forth between the actual search screen and these slides with the points, so hopefully it all makes sense to you. Let's talk first about the advanced search form. Hopefully you're all using the advanced search form. If you are not, you're missing out on the power of search available to you on Ancestry.com. So when you click on search, let me just scroll down here a little bit. If your search form looks like this, then you are not using the advanced search. If this is all that it allows you to fill in, okay? So pay attention to whether or not advanced is turned on or off, and you always want to be using the advanced search form. That's going to give you the most power. It's also going to give you the most control over what it is that you're searching. Now, if you're searching directly from your tree, where you just click search all records, that's fine, but sometimes that gives the search engine too much information. And so you need to be familiar with how to actually craft a search or create a search on your own using the advanced search form. One of the ways you can tell that you're using the advanced search form is that you're going to see these little links underneath the name fields. They're going to say use default settings, or next to anytime there's a date field, you're going to see a little exact checkbox. So that's what you're looking for to know that you're in the advanced search form. Now we're going to talk about these little filters in just a minute, but there's one other little box I want to show you here on this form. Right up here in the top left-hand corner, there's a box that says match all terms exactly. If I check that, when I check that, pay attention to all of these little filters and watch what happens. I check that, and now everything here says exact. Restrict to exact, the little exact check boxes are checked, okay? If I uncheck that, it sets everything back to default. So I can do a match all terms exactly search, but I don't do that very often because, like I said, very rarely does the information appear on the record exactly the way I would expect it to. So I use the search filters one field at a time based on what it is that I'm looking for. Now you can notice here I've got this one set to exact and this one is using default. If I've played with those, if I've set some of them and unset some of them and I've done this search, these are what we call sticky, which means they're going to stay exactly how they were the last time you did a search. So every once in a while I'll just come up here and check this box and uncheck it, and that sets everything back to default. Okay, that's what happens, I think, sometimes when some of you say, I did a search, and then I did the exact same search and I got different results. chances are one of those little settings was checked and you just didn't realize it. And so if you just check and uncheck this box, it sets everything back to default. So that's the advanced search form. You want to make sure that you're using that when you do your searches. Now, I just showed you the Use Default Settings button or link. Okay, it's where it says Use Default Settings. That's where you're going to control how you search on the names that you're searching. So that's what you want to be looking for. The first option under Use Default Settings is going to be Restrict to Exact Matches. Now, if I just did a search here for my grandfather, right, if I just put in just his name and I click search, Ancestry.com is going to search for his name, and anytime his name is in a record, that's what's going to come up near the top of my search results, right? But then, if his name's uncommon, or if I get to the bottom of those search results and we run out of Fred Cowans, it's going to start showing me different variations of this. Maybe men with the last name of Cowan who have a middle initial of F, or if I had put in additional information, it would use that to float different things to the top of my search list. So if you use the default settings, Ancestry.com uses its own search algorithms on the search information to decide what to search. And that's fine, because sometimes, like in this case, my grandfather's the very first record to come up, and that's what I was looking for anyway. But sometimes that's not the very first thing that comes up, or it's not exactly what we were looking for. And so this allows us then to control these search settings. I could say, only show me, restrict to exact matches. I only want to see men named Fred, and I only want to see men named Cowan. And then I can do that same search again now, and you'll notice that my number of search results goes way down, but those same two records are still at the top of the list. So I've narrowed my search results, but I haven't necessarily changed the order of my search results. Now, one of the ways you know if your setting is set to exact or not, if you look over here, you can see that his name, well, both names are in quotation marks. That's how I know that I've got the exact setting on this particular field, on the first name and surname field. I can then just go in and edit that any number of ways. So that's restrict to exact, which means it will only show me exactly what I asked to see, nothing else, okay? Next is what we call Soundex Matches. Now, Soundex is a system that was devised back when the 1880 census was being indexed for publication, long before online indexes and searching was available. It was a system of coding last names so that the indexers could look them up and see all the different spelling variations. If you Google Soundex Converter, on RootsWeb, which is an Ancestry.com community, you're going to find a Soundex converter, and sometimes it's fun to play with it just to see what comes up. So for example, if I enter my last name, C-O-W-A-N, and I click Get Soundex Code, the Soundex code for my last name is C for Cowan, and then the number 500, okay? So basically it takes the first letter of your name, it removes the vowels, and then it assigns a numerical value to the rest of the letters in your name. And then just below that, what you're going to see is all the other surnames that have that same Soundex code. Soundex just meaning loosely sounds like, right? So other last names that sound like my last name. And that could be how the census taker wrote it down or how it got indexed. So when you say select Soundex, that's what you're doing. And you can do that with any number of last names. You can just say, I want to see what the Soundex code is. Mostly, I just want to see what other names would come up in a search result. It's useful if you have a surname that often gets misspelled or that has been changed over time to see what some of the different possibilities are for that particular surname. Things that you probably wouldn't have even thought of had you been trying to make a list of all the different possible spelling variations. So it's just a little bit of an extra help to come here to the Soundex converter and to see some of these surnames. But that's what happens when you are on the surname field and you say restrict to exact and show me Soundex matches. You'll see here now it's added Soundex, and when I do a search now for all Fred Cowans. Again, Cowan is going to be at the top of the list, but if I switch over here to my category view and I pull up just the 1930 census, we're going to see very quickly that we run out of Cowans. If I scroll down here and jump to the end of the list, and we start seeing some of those other Soundex surnames. Con, Conway, Connie, Cano, Cone, right? All of those, Coin, all of those are Soundex matches for my surname. And so that is what that means, okay? The next one is going to be phonetic matches. Now, phonetic matches are a little bit different than Soundex matches. For Soundex, it always takes the first letter of the name and assigns the code. So my Soundex matches will always start with the letter C. However, my last name is pronounced Cowan, and K also makes the same phonetic sound as a C. And so if I say I want to also include phonetic matches, or I only want to see phonetic matches, then some of the results that get returned might begin with the letter K because it sounds the same. And that's important, again, because sometimes, a lot of times, census takers just wrote down what they heard. No one was telling them how to spell that name, especially if the family themselves were illiterate. So phonetic matches is just kind of an expansion of Soundex, but it includes that first character in their phonetic matches, where Soundex will always match the first character. The next option there under your name, under the name filter, is names with similar meanings or spellings. Okay, and so names that mean the same thing is a little bit trickier and probably not going to be used as often and that's why it's at the bottom of the list. But let me just give you an example. The name Blanco is a name that comes from Spain in particular. I know a lot of Blanco families in Spain. Some of those families, when they came to the United States, decided to translate their name. And so they then became the White family. And so Blanco and White mean the same thing, even though they're spelled entirely different and sound entirely different, but they have the same meaning. Okay, same thing, there are first names that have a similar thing, right? Johann and John, that's great, but because they kind of sound alike, you might find them using a phonetic match. However, Guillermo and William sound nothing alike, right? And so sometimes you need some of those similar meaning translations to occur in the search results. So that's just one of the options there. And then the final option here is records where only initials are recorded. There are some times when the census taker was copying the information into the big book that he was turning in, where I think he just got lazy. I've seen this in my own family. The 1880 census is notorious for it. The 1850 census, a lot of military records, where it only records the first and sometimes middle initial of the person in question. And so I could say do a search for all Fred Cowans exactly, but only show me but also show me records where initials are recorded. So then it would show me Fred, but it would also show me anybody with the first or middle initial of F. So it's, again, just a way to control your searches, give you a little more control over what you're getting returned in your search results. Play around with those. Here's one of the things that I find really interesting, and I don't know how you approach searching, but when I go onto a search engine like Google or Bing or Yahoo, when I go to one of those search engines, I very rarely go through more than a page of search results. If what I want doesn't show up, sometimes even above the fold, I don't even want to have to scroll, right? If it doesn't show up right near the top of my search results, I'm adding search words or subtracting search words or changing search words to find what it is that I'm looking for. That should be your similar approach on Ancestry.com. You don't just fill in the information and then expect to have whatever you want show up at the top of the list, especially when you start to consider some of the variances in records. So very often I will play with these particular search results a little bit. Okay, now I'll show you a couple of ways I do that here in just a minute, but let me just talk about wildcards before we do that. Wildcards are available for name fields on Ancestry.com. There are 2 wildcards that are recognized, and this is important to understand what they are because you want to make sure you don't ever include either of these characters in the actual name itself, because that can mess up your search results if you're doing automatic searches directly from your tree. So an asterisk, on most keyboards that's going to be the Shift 8. An asterisk replaces multiple characters in a word. Okay, and I'll show you some examples of how I use this. A question mark replaces a single character. Okay, so if I just want to replace one character, I'm going to use a question mark. If I want to replace multiple characters, I'm going to use an asterisk. Let me show you what that looks like. My grandfather's name is Fred. Reset these filters. Okay, my grandfather's name is Fred, but for most of his life, he thought he was a junior, a true junior, and his father's name was Frederick. And his father, his name was spelled a lot of different ways. I actually have a military document where his name is spelled 2 different ways on the same document, right? F-R-E-D-E-R-I-C-K or F-R-E-D-R-I-C-K. Sometimes that ending K could be an H, or it could just be a messy K and look like an H. Lots of different ways that his name is sometimes spelled. His whole life, excuse me, my grandmother called him Freddie, and that could be spelled F-R-E-D-D-I-E or F-R-E-D-D-Y, right? You start to see what's happening. And so if I was looking for records for him, I might need to use a wildcard, F-R-E-D asterisk. What that means is it will catch all instances of Fred, but then also any variant of additional letters that may or may not occur after it. So an asterisk replaces 0 to multiple characters, okay? Now, in order to activate the wildcard, you want to make sure that you restrict to exact matches. If I leave that use default settings, then Ancestry.com is just going to use its own search algorithm. But if I restrict it to exact, it's only going to show me Fred with any instances of a suffix that may be attached to that particular name. Okay, that's how I use the wildcard, the asterisk wildcard. Now, my last name is spelled C-O-W-A-N, but I have seen it spelled C-O-W-E-N and C-O-W-I-N. Both of those spelling variations are included in Soundex Matches. But if you remember, there's also all these other surnames that are included in Soundex. And if I don't want to have to wade through all of the Canes and the Conways and the Conies on top of it, I can just use a wildcard. I can put a question mark in the place of the last vowel in my name. And again, to activate that wildcard, I'm going to mark this as exact, and it will now return me all surnames that are C-O-W something N. And I'll get all of those particular variations. Really, really powerful, really, really useful tool, wildcards. They allow you, again, to control your search results completely. So you could use default settings, and you may find what you're looking for somewhere in those search results, but I don't like to go through pages and pages of search results. I want to control my search results and see what I can cause to come up on some of those variations. Now, wildcards come with a few parameters that you need to be aware of. Wildcards can be used at the beginning or the end of a word. So, for example, some of you have a surname, the surname Lawyer comes to mind, right? I have seen very few people who actually have the surname Lawyer. And yet if you did a search for it, you would find quite a few. And the reason is because a lot of people who have the surname Sawyer, S-A-W-Y-E-R, that initial S is sometimes written so sloppily by people on records that it looks like an L. And so it's been transcribed as an L. So I could actually use a question mark as a begins with wildcard and then search any suffix. I could use an asterisk if I wanted to replace multiple characters at the beginning of a word. So you can use wildcards at the beginning, middle, or end of a word. Okay. The parameter is, however, you cannot use a wildcard at both the beginning and the end. So I couldn't do question mark AW asterisk, right? That's not allowable. So I can use a wildcard at the beginning, in the middle, or the end, but not at both the beginning and the end in the same search, okay? The other parameter that we place on this, and this is kind of a forced parameter just because of the way that computing power and permutations work, there has to be at least 3 consecutive characters or letters somewhere in the word, okay? So for example here, I've got COW, then the wildcard, then an N. I couldn't do CO asterisk N, right? Because there are not 3 consecutive letters then in the word. So you need 3 consecutive letters in the word, but feel free to play with those wildcards. Remember, you do need to set the filter to exact in order to activate that wildcard, but play with them. See what different kinds of search results you get. See what kinds of things come up in your search results when you use that wildcard. You may discover, again, spellings and misspellings of some of the names that you've been searching for that you never before considered. Really, really, really powerful, powerful tool. Okay. That's it about the given name and surname field and the wildcards. I actually just want to share with you we have a few minutes left, a couple of bonus tips that help me get the most out of searching. One of these is something that I do constantly, but I think I've mentioned a couple of them. Let me just review. First of all, when you're starting a new search, sometimes just check and uncheck that match all terms exactly box to make sure all of your filters are set back to default. Okay? The second one is don't just do searches from your tree. So I know a lot of you, when you're in your tree, you click search historical records from a person page and it fills in all the fields for you, and that's great, but sometimes giving too much information to a search engine can cause as many problems as giving too little information to a search engine. So if you're looking for something in particular, just be willing to maybe sometimes do a really simple search. So for example, if I'm looking for Sarah Harrington, maybe that's the only thing I want to search, and I'm not even going to mark any filters on that. I'm just going to search for Sarah Harrington and see what comes up. Okay, now I've got my filters set here at the bottom. Let me just reset those, make sure I get everything that I'm interested in. You can say I only want to see historical records, or I only want to see, family trees. You can decide what it is you want to look at. You'll notice here I've also got the collection priority set to United States, and I only want to see records from those collections. If you only have a US subscription, you want to make sure you've always got that set, or you're going to end up getting search results from all over the world. Or if you know you're looking for somebody in the UK, set it to UK and mark that exact. Then those are the only search results you'll get. So this collection priority section, I make sure I've got it pretty solid most of the time. I'm going to do that search again now. Here, I get 2.3 million search results. Now, I'm not expecting that my first search is going to give me the answer I'm looking for. What I'm trying to discover is, how common is this surname? Where does it show up? What kinds of things are happening here? Then I'm going to use my favorite field, and it's a field that I think gets very little use, but this is the big bonus tip of the day. There is a field here, when you click on this Any Event button, you have birth, death, marriage, all sorts of information. There is a field here called Lived In. If I know that I am only interested in women named Sarah Harrington who lived in Ohio, I'm going to select that, and then I'm going to mark that exact. Okay? That allows me to only see search results that have something to do with the state of Ohio. Maybe she was born there, maybe she died there, maybe she was married there, maybe she only lived there for one census. But every search result will now only pertain somehow to the state of Ohio. So that lived in field will take my search results down from 2 point something million to 45,000, right? That's more manageable. Not only that, very rarely do I use my search results in this fashion. Sometimes I'll look at them just to see what floats to the top of the list. But if I know, for example, that I'm looking for an 1880 census, I'm going to come directly over here to my 1880 census search results, and that's all I'm going to look at. Not only that, if I happen to know that Sarah was born in 1825, I only want to see search results for women who were born in about 1825 who were absolutely living in Ohio at that time period. And now I've only got 31 of them. As a matter of fact, I don't even really have 31. I only have 2 because Ancestry found 2, and then when it couldn't find any more, it's showing me people with other first names. Okay? And so I've just narrowed my search results down from 2 point something million to 2. And if she is not one of those 2 people, well, then maybe I'm going to change my search results a little bit. Maybe she wasn't really living in Ohio that year like I thought she was. Maybe she's living in Pennsylvania, and so I need to do a quick search there. Maybe I know she was born in New Jersey or whatever, right? So then I just add and subtract information from my search form until I find what it is that I'm looking for. You'll notice I don't go through pages and pages of search results. I don't go through results that are not pertinent, right? I look for a specific database, the specific census, or I'll come over here and, if I know she died in Ohio, I'm going to look directly at that particular database. I'm not going to go searching through all 12 billion plus records on Ancestry.com. So that's the big bonus search tip, which is use that lived in field to narrow down your search results to a specific location. You can get really specific. For example, if you know that the family never lived anywhere other than Wellsville, Ohio, you can say, only show me people with this last name living in Wellsville, Ohio. And it will show you a very concise, specific list. If you're not certain about where they lived, or if you know they lived in a specific county or in a specific 2 or 3 counties, one of the things that the location fields allow you to filter on is adjacency. So I can say, I know that they lived in Columbiana County, Ohio, and so I'm going to mark that exact. But they may have lived just over the county border, or the county borders may have shifted just a little bit, and I'm not exactly sure what year that occurred. And so I want to see search results for anybody in that county or adjacent counties. And then I'm going to run that search again. Okay, so that's how I use search, and I find not just a lot of success, but very quick success by just quickly running through some of those different search parameters. Do a search one way, see what shows up at the top of the list. Do a search another way, see what shows up at the top of the list. Do a search without a first name, just use a surname and a location. See how many people are living in a specific location that have that surname, so that I can see if any of those first names are familiar, or if I can narrow it down to a particular family. Searching should be an iterative experience, not just a hit a button, get a result. And it is very much an iterative experience. But if you can learn to iterate quickly, you'll find your results a lot more quickly than you do with some of those one-hit search results and then going through pages and pages. Hopefully this has been useful and helpful to you. I'm excited to hear about the kinds of searches that you're doing, and if you have other search challenges, please email me at ask@ancestry.com, and I may put together another couple of presentations specifically on using the search engine at Ancestry.com. Until next time, this is Crista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.